I'm Sora Luxon, and this is Hermetic Principle number 7, the principle of gender. I'm going to have to talk pretty quick here, guys, so try to forgive me because it's a pretty broad topic to have to fit into a very short YouTube type podcast. So, the principle of gender, it's in everything and manifests on all planes. It's sometimes called the principle of generation rather than the Hermetic principle of gender. It's the same thing. It explains that everything has two elements, the masculine and the feminine. Two energetic halves, which aren't halved but are interwoven as an energetic whole, because one can't exist or function without the other. On our physical plane, we sometimes understand that as man and woman, right? The definition of the sexes. But obviously, even such a simplistic explanation has to acknowledge that a man is going to have both masculine and feminine qualities, and so does a woman. She's also going to have both feminine and masculine qualities, right? So to look at this principle in a more fundamental way, or as operating on different planes of existence, the principle moves beyond physical trifles such as man or woman and into the realm of polar extreme energies. For instance, in Taoist philosophies, the masculine and feminine are believed to be the same energy, just in differing forms. That's much more in step with what the Hermetic principle of gender is explaining. We can adjust our masculine and feminine forces within us, and they can be used to attract people and things to either help or hinder us or specific goals. Masculine energy is directed and impresses itself on feminine energy. Feminine energy then accepts that imprint, and having received that set of instructions from the masculine, takes that sort of stamped idea, form, blueprint, however you want to think of it. It accepts it, absorbs it, and then later, for lack of a better term, gives birth to it. That is, it builds from the impression supplied by the masculine penetrative force and allows its creation, producing the form it has been given the instructions to make. These forces are within everything, including us. They attract or repel certain aspects of our reality and how that reality functions. So by taking control of them, we can control to varying degrees what we repel or attract and what our own reality is. You can easily see here how types of biologic physical sex adhere to the Hermetic principle of gender. But that isn't all or only what the principle is defining. In a way, everything in magic is sex. Yes, it is. But not in the way that most conspiracy theorists or the internet, the population en masse, believe or would have others believe. If you've listened to some of my earlier magic lessons, then you likely already have a very much clearer idea, or will soon have a clearer idea, as to how the law of polarity and gender have a lot of similarities and coincide with each other. And that should give you some idea of how this principle of gender ought to be approached and understood, rather than that common diatribe, right? About everything in magic being a symbol of a phallus, right? Everything's a phallic symbol, or whatever other nonsense people are constantly going on about. Everything is magic, after all. I've said this before in other lessons, right? I'm always repeating it. Magic is everywhere and in everything and everyone. Everyone's a part of it, whether they know it or not, whether they're using it and controlling it, or being used and controlled by it. It's still everywhere and everything. It should come as no surprise then that the 7 Hermetic principles, which all magic functions from, are also going to be in everything. So yes, in one way, magic is sex and sex is everywhere in magic. But we are not talking about strictly physical sex, okay? That's not what we're talking about here. Even though, yes, on this physical plane, physical sex does adhere to the law of gender. But we're not talking about that one small part of the puzzle. The principle of gender, or generation, is using the words feminine and masculine to describe and define a much broader, more powerful concept, which operates across all planes of existence, including non-physical planes. Thoughts are a realm of non-physicality, right? After all, and they're real, thoughts are real. The masculine and the feminine are absolutely within the realm or plane of thought, as they are everywhere else. There are two forces, the masculine and the feminine, because like everything else, these forces have to adhere to all of the other Hermetic laws. So they have to abide by the principle of duality and polarity. And so there are two, the masculine and the feminine. Masculine, or male energetic force, it's described as a positive energetic force usually. This is how we have to talk about it, right? It projects, or it's projective, or penetrating. It pushes outside of itself. While the feminine or female force is a negative energetic force, which draws inward or pulls into itself rather than penetrating, it absorbs and assimilates. Now, bear in mind, right, the common sense of magic, that words like positive and negative, in the explanation that I'm giving here, they have nothing to do with good or bad. We're not talking about negative being bad and positive being good. We're not talking about a positive masculine force somehow being better than the negative female force. That's not what we're discussing, right? We're talking about polarity. We're talking about polar forces, right? Positive and negative, the same way they'd be on a magnet. One attracts, one repels. So where masculine energy forces or gives, feminine energy accepts and receives. The will in magic, that I'm always referring to as something that you need to take control of, right? Take control of your will in order to hold and use your power. That conscious will, it's a brazen force, right? It's that hot, sometimes we call it fiery, right? It's energetic, that conscious mind, those conscious decisions that you make and enforce and impress. That's the masculine energy operating from the law of gender and magic. The feminine energy is that passive or accepting energy of the feminine. It's what resides in the subconscious mind. It's what's taking everything in. It pulls everything into itself. See, where the masculine gender force of magical energy is pushing and penetrating, the feminine force is allowing and receiving and taking. When your self-enforced habits or self-enforced decisions, for lack of a better term, when your will does manage to successfully pierce the passive or the subconscious mind, when it penetrates and imprints itself onto the subconscious mind, the subconscious will take in and gestate those functions, those forms and ideas, instructions given by the will, given by the masculine energetic force. And the will, now taken in by the feminine subconscious, in turn is going to produce those results. So when you're using the masculine energies of the will correctly in your controlled magical practices, you are enforcing those instructions onto the feminine energies, which then develop and generate the results of those instructions. And they're going to manifest them in perfect harmony every time, aka synchronicity with your reality every time, if you're doing it correctly and if you're doing it in a balanced way. The Hermetic principle of gender in this instance reveals to us why passively hoping or meditating or peacefully visualizing on a less than fully conscious and unforceful level, not that there's anything wrong with any of that, but that doing that is a feminine energetic form, while actively doing things, making, enforcing, making decisions, expressing them, passionately provoking our intentions. That's a masculine energetic form. Both the masculine and the feminine energies operate from the great law of gender, and both have to be understood and employed to do magic. Both energies are necessary for results to manifest. Another way to think of it is, you probably know somebody like this, right? Somebody that you'd say they're always running around with their hair on fire, right? That's fiery masculine energy, running around in an exaggerated manner, being constantly active, chasing goal after goal with no foresight, no vision, but always moving, right? And it's not producing a gainful outcome. That's the dynamic, passionate, masculine energy operating by itself. But if it's the only thing operating, right, then you're not going to get anywhere with that. And you're going to take a really long time to accomplish a goal. On the other hand, if you're just sitting around daydreaming or with your dream board or whatever the heck, right? If you're just sitting in a room visualizing what you want all day, you're also not getting any closer to actually achieving that goal. You can meditate on it, that's nice, but sitting and all the meditating in the world is not going to make what you want appear, right? Because you're only using one of the energies, the feminine energy. See, one or the other of the gender forces isn't enough in magic or anywhere else. And you need to understand this, and you need to use both. If you use the conscious and subconscious mind together, for example, if you use an active and passive force together, if you calmly visualize your end goal and also take forceful actions, right actions to achieve it, that's how you're going to manifest things. That's how you're going to accomplish things. That's how you're going to make magic work correctly. Instead of just being used by magic, it's how you learn to use magic, right? If you want something and think of it, and that thought inspires you to get up and get it, that's magic. It's a simple, low form of magic, yes, but it's still magic. Complicated high magics function the same way. Incredibly powerful ritual magic functions the same way. It only looks more impressive and strange to a non-practitioner, like something miraculous or magical, quote unquote, because the person using and controlling their high-level magics can manifest results that that person, that non-initiate or non-practitioner, can't comprehend as being possible. So for them, it's startling or out of the realm of possibility. But it really is possible. And it's still the same thing that's happening there as far as the operation of the magic itself. Magic always manifests results, and the results depend on how well your magic is done and how powerfully you're able to do it. Of course, the principle of gender doesn't only apply to making magic results in day-to-day life, right? It is a cornerstone of reality. It's one of the great Hermetic principles. As I mentioned earlier, gender is manifest across all planes, not just our own, even planes without physical form or any form of sex. But I did say that I tell you not only what each of the Hermetic principles is in some detail, but also how you can actually apply them and work with them, right? How you can start operating within these principles. So the operating principles of the masculine and feminine energies of gender functioning as, say, the conscious and unconscious or subconscious mind are one way you can begin working with Hermetic principles and applying them. There are others. There are other ways to work with the principle of gender. The feminine in Hermetics is a threshold to other Sopheric planes. Most people have heard of the divine feminine, right? In one way or another. And there's a reason that that phrase gets used so much, although often inaccurately and without explanation of how to use that key and how to employ it. But I'll get into some of those other ways to approach and use the principle of gender instead of being used by it in some other magical lesson because we're out of time. So until next time.